Paranormal King Radio Network, bringing you the best paranormal hosts and guests. Bringing you the best paranormal shows and features. Playing the top musical artists from around the world. Paranormal King Radio Network. With the best paranormal hosts and guests. The best in paranormal shows and features. Playing the best musical artists from around the world. Paranormal King Radio Network. The paranormal will never be the same.
You are listening to Paranormalities and Ponderings with the C.A.S.P.I.R Paranormal team. Brought to you by the Paranormal King Radio Network and hosted by Frank Lee. Join us for the next hour as we discuss ghosts, spirits, hauntings, and otherworldly phenomena that has yet to be explained in the hopes of finding answers. This show is meant to be a resource for those of you who, like us, seek to find answers to the unknown. We hope you find it informative and enjoy the show. Once again, thank you for listening.
Welcome to Paranormalities and Ponderings, and thank you for tuning in this week. Hope you're having a good week so far, and we've got a great guest for you tonight. It's Kat Hobson from Scare, Alabama. Kat, how are you tonight?
I'm doing well, Frank. How about you?
I'm doing great. I'm enjoying this wonderful weather we're having down here in Alabama, and I imagine there's probably quite a few people jealous, but
that's all right.
It has been awesome.
It has. We're going to get spoiled with this, you know.
Yes, definitely. And it's wonderful weather to enjoy this busy time of the year for us in the paranormal field. Because I know we've been busy, and I know your team's been rather busy too. I've seen that y'all have had quite a bit going on lately.
We do. We had an investigation at a location that asked to be undisclosed this past weekend that was very active, very historical. And, of course, our team leader is the author of Haunted Shelby County, and we've got events going on relevant to that. Mm-hmm. So we're kind of slamming and jamming. Lots of residential right now.
Absolutely, and that's one thing I've got to say about your team, about Scare Alabama, is that you've got one of the busiest teams that I've seen. It's like you always have something going on, and poor Kim had for anyone that didn't catch the show, that the very first show that I did actually had Kim on there, and Kim Johnston, she, you know, team leader, always got an author, just constantly on the go. Matter of fact, I was talking to her the other day, and I told her that I believe she's the only person I know that stays as busy as I do.
You throw in the parenting and jobs into that, and you're some busy folk.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I hear that on the investigation you had the other night that we can't reveal any details about, But I hear that it was rather interesting.
It was brilliant. It was it's hard to describe it because it's a one of a kind type location. But the historic value included a mining camp, and it included a Native American trail, like an intersection area.
Hmm.
So there was activity from several different perspectives, and I was just blown away. I was not expecting that.
Now I will pull a little wild card out of the hat on you.
Uh-oh.
I was doing a little research the other day on ley lines, and I'm not sure if you've ever looked much into that. I've always been kind of skeptical about ley lines,
Have you?
and it yeah, it's kind of one of those things that I felt people looked at more from a mystical sense than a scientific sense. And
True.
like our conversation that we were having before the show, that's something that I'm working at, is trying to kind of open myself up to looking more at the spiritual side and the metaphysical side of the house. But if you look at the ley line map, there's a ley line intersection very close to the location where you investigated the other night.
That's interesting that you noted that. We have, I had just the other day seen a ley line map, and I had not realized that. So I love when things come together unexpectedly. But I am a big believer in ley lines, and I find it interesting the different areas, even even out over oceans
Hmm.
that have activity that are heavily cross sectioned.
Absolutely. And I believe that perhaps with some more research, if they can better tie in certain areas. Of course, I feel that like the stone tape theory, you hear that thrown around so much, and I see so many loopholes from what I've encountered personally and what the stone tape theory suggests that I have a hard time sticking to the official version. I think they got it close, but not exactly right. I think if you take some of the key principles from the stone tape theory and apply that to the ley lines, and then look at geomagnetism and a few other factors like that, that they could eventually come up and hold some good scientific value. So I wouldn't discredit them completely. So.
Well, I will tell you that metaphysical just blasts right into physical so often.
Hmm.
And you can find, with a little bit of work, you can usually back up most principles with proof. There's
Absolutely.
some, it's like with the paranormal investigations. Um, when you get a verbal response, whether you're doing an EVP or an SP7 or the Echo Box, um, oftentimes you'll find that the information you receive using that methodology can be documented in records.
Hmm.
And that just blows me away when that happens, even though I've done it for so long.
Absolutely. And I will say this. What I agree with what you're saying 100%, because science is ever changing, it's ever evolving. And what we know to be fact today can change and be completely different tomorrow. If you think about it, 500 years ago, or well, 600 years ago, we knew that the earth was flat. That was
Without
scientific
doubt.
fact.
Without doubt.
And, 1,000 years ago, we knew that the Earth was the center of the universe. That was scientific fact. So, who is to say that, tomorrow, 10 years from now, 100 years from now, the things that we're researching that a lot of your mainstream science is saying that doesn't exist, that they're laughing, scoffing at, is going to be accepted scientific fact. Here it is. This is the textbook on it.
I am interested in that from the perspective of I have not had the experience that you had physically.
Mm-hmm.
And yet there are so many people who come back who are able to describe, and even some doctors are now believing. There's actual research going on more. And there's just no telling, as you said, what we'll be able to document in the future that's going to just be, boom, there you go. I noticed that there was a new television show premiering last night that involved two young men who had both had near-death experiences.
Yes.
One had been flatlined for 6 minutes, and they are now researching, avidly.
Mm-hmm.
And I just found that interesting too.
I actually watched that with the Ghost Stalkers.
Yes, that is the show. John Tenney, and I'm afraid I don't know the other young man's name.
I can't think of it either. I remember because I remember David Roundtree had came on the show, and he was showing his device that he had designed to detect wormholes and vortices.
Was that not amazing?
That was, especially watching the responses that they were getting.
Yes.
That I find that to be fascinating, and I was very interested in the show when I found out that both of the people that were the main researchers on the show did have near-death experiences. Because, prior to the show, me and you were talking about my near-death experience that I had as a child.
Yes.
And I do, like they had suggested, I do believe that does give you some type of, I guess that puts you in tune in some sort of way with certain
I think it
energies.
teach you, like, if you had a mystic do that for you.
Hmm.
If, like, if for the average person that can have that done, that's fortunate to know someone who can do it, I think it opens you up because you've already been there.
Right. I
And just for the record, can I say that the other young man's name
hmm
is Chad Lindbergh. I didn't want to be leaving anybody out discussing it. But, when I saw that wormhole detector, the first thing I thought was, I have got to get me one of those.
now
I was fascinated.
now that's one thing about that's one thing I've got to say about David Roundtree is if you've ever seen any of his work that he does, he is as hardcore scientific as it gets. He's with Spirit Lab, New Jersey, and does amazing work. He's about as close to the mad scientist of the paranormal as you can get,
I know.
really. But fascinating things that he comes up with.
And all effective. I'm sure there are several that aren't. You have to have so many failures before you actually achieve that kind of success. But I'm just always amazed
Hmm.
because my brain does not work that way.
Absolutely.
So I appreciate the ones who do.
Absolutely, and it takes a certain amount of creativity because there's so many uses and things for objects that you would never think of. Like, a couple of weeks ago, I had Mike St. Clair from Viper Paranormal on the show, and if you heard that show, I swear he is like the MacGyver of the paranormal.
We
I,
have those in North Alabama. I swear to goodness, those are awesome people.
I I swear you could give Mike St. Clair a paper clip, a piece of paper, maybe 4 inches of wire and a magnet, and he could rig up something that he just does amazing things, and he is so creative with coming up with these uses of just everyday things that you have laying around your house. Or you can say, hey, we're going on an investigation, here's $20, go to Walmart, and he's going to come out with a load of stuff that you can use on your investigation effectively. He blows my mind with some of his videos and things that he has. So there's definitely so many things out there that you can use. But anyway, talking about everyone else, let's talk about you a little bit.
Okay.
So what was it that really got you into the paranormal?
Um, I've always had sensitivities, and that just wasn't done. So I learned to put them to the back burner, as it were, and I was fine with that. Except every so often it would still rear its head. I've always been very sensitive to the energies around me.
Hmm.
I am an empath. I can read people very well and situations. And when I was younger, I would have extraordinary deja vu, and like I thought it was normal for everyone, but apparently not. I used it as a decision making tool for events in my life. It was so frequent and so correct. And I I lost a nephew and did not really know for sure what I thought about the afterlife and communication and that kind of thing. And he did reach out, and my sister and I were estranged at the time. I called her just to say, what do you need? And she was actually going to be having surgery. And without him having reached out in the way that he did, I would never have made that phone call, and I would never have spent time with her, and she would have been left in need.
Oh, wow.
And I became an adamant believer in the fact that spirits do reach out to you. And if there is a need for someone that they love, they're going to do their best to help that need be met. And I had always been interested in the various television shows. There's some that I think are more my style because they're scientifically based more than emotional. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with either of those, but I personally am not someone who is going to be a provocateur
Right.
with the spirit. I see no reason to be rude. I think one of my favorite quotes by any paranormal investigator was by Grant Wilson when he was trying to explain something to a client, and he said, they're people too.
Absolutely.
And if you come into someone's house and you're all up in their face and all up in their business with a terrible attitude, that's what you're going to get back. And I've tried to always be polite. I will say that I get told inappropriate things by spirits a lot more than Kim does, because Kim's got a sweet and nice voice. And they will respond to her and they will just tell me to shut up or other things. And it's very frustrating because I'm a nice person by Jingo, but it's really funny. It's gotten to be comical almost.
Right.
So, but
So
then I found, I'm sorry.
I was just about to ask. So you finding that comparison with you two being on the same team, how many times do you find yourself being kind of thrown in as bait because of
I
that?
don't think she throws me in as bait on purpose, but it really is Kim and I, and we have several people on our team.
Mhm.
We're a good team of good people. And we have Shane, our co founder, who is the tech side. He is going to be filming and monitoring, he's not going to be questioning. Kim and I are kind of the people who do the EVP sessions along with Wanda Reeves and Nicole, and Blaine Rohan participates with us when he has time to.
Mhm.
And we just try to help people.
And I know Blaine's listening. I've talked to Blaine on the phone enough, and everyone's heard Blaine on the show. That there's nowhere Blaine goes or no conversation with Blaine in it that there isn't something that doesn't get stirred up.
Well, it's because they know him. And it's so funny because I did not know what to make of Blaine when I met him. And I'm so glad now that we did meet and that we worked together.
Hmm.
I had I had a negative experience with another team,
Right.
and it was just a completely different thing with my team. Well, our team. I consider them mine because I love all of them. But this is all teamwork.
Hmm.
It's all about, if Kim has something going on with a book, she and Shane are in the process of writing a new book, and it's going to be Haunted Talladega County. But they're both tied up with research for that and getting all of the ducks in a row to get the final product out. And so, she'll say,
Right.
I have this going on, and I'll go with whoever is available, usually Wanda, and we'll go and do a home visit.
Hmm.
And I love that we can do that. We have that much confidence in each other and that much, faith in each other's professionalism and skill set. And it's really a cool thing.
Absolutely. And the para unity that we have within the teams here in the state is I've never seen it anywhere else.
Me either.
It's really awesome, and I believe that it it sets a good example that I believe should be the standard.
I agree. And, unfortunately, in my experience, I was participating with a team that the founder was interested in personal glory
Hmm.
and wanted to control all of the evidence and was pretty effective at that. And that's very difficult because if you're investigating, you want to know what you got. If something was interacting with you when you go back to review EVPs, you want your EVPs. And it's just really a difficult thing when you don't have that camaraderie and you don't have that confidence and faith in each other.
Absolutely, it makes all the difference in the world. And when you're able to work together on projects, have joint investigations, it does. It makes all the difference. And everyone working together on research, on just helping out, saying, hey, we've got this client here that we can't get to right now, but they need help. Can you help them? And just having that rapport between the teams, it makes all the difference in the world.
Absolutely. And people want to keep their locations to themselves, or they want to keep this to themselves, or, you know, it really is all about the client.
It
It's
is.
all about people who are having an issue, who need their home cleansed, or who need to understand what they're dealing with, or just to be able to feel a normal level of comfort when they walk in their door. And, you know, you and I have talked about 909, you know, everything, 99.97%
Hmm.
is going to be not a negative issue.
Right.
And, you know, I'm sure that there are those, and I am not the person for that. I understand my limitations, and I would call someone in who was able to focus on that. But I would not abandon my client either.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I just think it's so important to bring somebody peace in their home.
Right, because the type teams that we have, we don't do very much. Hey, let's go check out this graveyard or this abandoned building. That's not what
Now
we
I've
do.
done that,
Right.
yeah,
But
but not just for peeps and giggles, but for building investigative skills.
and but 99% of the time, if that phone rings, it's someone saying, "Help! I'm in my house. I can't sleep. This is going on. We're scared. We need help."
And please come now.
Absolutely. So and you have to really, as an investigator, you've got to put yourself in that client's shoes.
Yes,
For us, we deal with it regularly. It's not an alarming situation to us, but the fear of the unknown is something that is one of the worst fears there is, and there's more terror involved in it because if you're afraid of snakes, you know the consequences of being bitten by a snake. You know the consequences of being bitten by a spider. But the unknown, that's a whole different story. You don't know what's there, what could happen, what can come of it. Is it harmful? Is it not? Is it fatal? Is it and and it can make someone literally drive themselves crazy with fear.
yes.
And to have that in your own home, there is no escape for you. You're
And you imagine that fear when you have children in the home,
hmm and
and that just perpetuates.
right, especially if the children seem to be the focal point of the activity. And me being a parent myself, it when your children are sick or something's bothering your children, there's that feeling of helplessness because there's some things that you can't do to make them better. And when you have a situation such as a haunting and you're not familiar with how it works, you've never dealt with this before, it you've got to imagine the terror that your clients are really going through.
Yes. And you have to find a way to alleviate that terror. And if that means that I can't get there because I'm out of town, I've got somebody, you know, sick, we can't get a team together, then you've got to find someone to get to them. And that's where para unity comes in.
Yes,
And it's so important because, you can't have someone suffering just because you're busy if you can possibly get them any other help.
absolutely.
And that's
Absolutely.
where the trust between teams comes from too, comes into play, because you have to know that the team that you're sending is reputable and not fear mongers and is going to be able to do things in the way that you would like to see them done, even though methods are different, personalities are different, but you need to know that everyone's working toward the same goal of peace to that client, and not
Absolutely.
trying to, and not trying to hype it up.
Right, because if you have a team that goes in, if when they leave, if that client is more afraid than when the team got there, then they've
Yep.
just made a bad situation worse.
Yes, and
Or
then that person is going to start, thinking that whatever they have involved in their home is something so much worse and so much more horrid than they initially thought, because the paranormal investigators couldn't help it. They got worse, they got angry or whatever, when actually things probably haven't changed. They're just more aware of it. And whatever that team said is what actually put more fear in them.
Absolutely. Or you have the opposite side of that, where perhaps the team comes in, say the activity is mild to moderate.
Right.
Team comes in, they're using provocation, they're
Oh gosh, yeah.
irresponsible. And I know that you've had to deal with these type cases too, where a team comes in, they do more damage than good.
Yes.
They ramp up the activity. Whatever's there that was mild goes from mild to moderate, more toward
Because
moderate
it's
to
angry.
severe.
Because it gets angry.
So
And
that's something to be considered too.
yes, provocation, I don't care who you are, provocation is dangerous, in my opinion, because, even the young man who lives by that on television suffers consequences for it. And, you just can't go into something looking for a fight. It's always better, in my opinion, not to do that.
Right.
Because, like I said, you bust in the door with an attitude, you're going to get an attitude bowed back up at you. I would be bowed up.
Absolutely.
The spirit. So, I think knowing who you're sending in your place when you have that situation is vastly important.
Absolutely. And for other investigators out there, that me and you both, as we were talking about before the show, you get such a, this is something that I preach constantly. You talk about it constantly as well, is go in with positivity. Be polite, be courteous to them, and you'll get such a better reaction. Because someone comes in being rude, you're not going to talk to them. You're going to tell them to get out.
Well, absolutely. And I saw where one of the chat room people were asking about if I had something, or did I fear bringing something home with me. And that goes back to, I think, being provocative as well as just things happen. I went into Fort Morgan curious, down in Gulf Shores, Alabama. I went in there curious about what was there. I was learning how to use some equipment and, taking my time with it. Started having a very active voice box session, and it was really cool. That was my first time using an SP7, and it was very clear that it was a conversation, not interference. It was very specific. And when I left, I told the spirits, thank you so much for this opportunity. I appreciate you. And I went home. Oh, and I also said, you can't come home with me.
Yes.
I went home. I was home alone, got out of the shower, was going through the house, and smelled cigarette smoke. And nobody in my family smokes. So I thought someone was in my house, which would be weird because I have 4 dogs. And there was no one there. And it dawned on me who it was, and that's where being a sensitive can come in handy. And I just told Doug that he would have to leave. And I hoped that he knew how to get back to Fort Morgan, but, basically you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.
Absolutely.
And
Here's a map if you need it, but not here.
yes. And that's something people don't understand a lot of times too, is that you can take ownership of your home. You are the ruler of your roost, and if you are polite about it and explain it, generally things are not looking to give you a hard time. They're just looking around. I think that things that are there have a reason to be there, whether it's an emotional tie or a physical tie to the location. And this individual was just curious about me because we had talked for so long. And he did follow me home after being told not to. And when I told him he had to leave, this was my home, you can't be here, I told you that, he left. And no more
Absolutely.
problems. I
And
just ownership.
and so many people seem to exhibit fear to do that, but they don't understand when they truly do show ownership and authority over their home, that makes all the difference.
Yes. You have to fight that fear.
And you saying that reminds me of a case that we investigated recently, and this was a home which you're going to find this ironic. That same ley line that or one of the same ley lines that intersects at the location you were at investigating the other night, that same ley line goes within a quarter of a mile of this home. So, for whatever that's worth, just keep that in mind. This home was built in the early 1930s, and over the course of this home's history, there had been 5 different murders in the home.
In the home?
In the home. And
Wow.
on top of the murders, there had been about 4 different unexplained deaths. So everyone that we had mentioned anything to it about had said, oh, that's going to require a heavy duty cleansing, because it was quite an active place. And everyone was telling the client, oh, you might as well move. There's no way you're ever going to get that activity to settle down. That property's cursed, blah, blah, blah. Just basically filling the client full of fear. Well, we go there, and when we went, now some of the murders were pretty gruesome. One particular murder occurred during the 80s. Was a hiker that had his bedroll in his backpack, and his backpack and bedroll was still in the basement. It had never been taken out. And there were a couple of people that had been murdered there that were actually chained up in this basement and kept there before they were murdered. There was a grave in the basement, and the owner had inadvertently dug in one particular spot of the basement. It was basically a dirt cellar, and had inadvertently dug and found bone fragments. So quite a quite a gruesome history.
Quite a basement you don't want to go in.
Right. It was very active. Me and one of the other investigators were in the basement, and we're in there. It's pretty much pitch black except for our one little flashlight, and we're in there doing a little EVP session, and we have a voice whisper in our ear. Me and her were standing next to each other, and this voice, we could feel something behind us, that eerie sensation you get when somebody's standing behind you in the dark.
And there's no doubt they're there.
Mm-hmm. And we hear this woman's voice whisper in our ear. And we audibly hear it and feel the breath on our ears, where it tickles the little hairs on the inside of your ears, saying, "Get out of the basement."
Get out of town.
I'm not kidding. And it was amazing.
Did you get out of the basement?
Oh, no.
Of course you didn't. You had a project to finish.
Right. At that point, it's like, oh, yeah, we're in the right place.
Yes. I love when you get confirmation like that.
Right, and we had the K2 in there. We had we had the K2. We had the voice recorder going, and we we ended up bringing the Echo Vox down there, and an amazing Echo Vox session. We were getting different languages, and we were getting accents. We got a British accent from a lady down there, and when we talked to the homeowner confirmed that there was a lady who had lived two houses down that had died several years prior who had a British accent. And just it was crazy. Um, we but as we were there was all of this activity going on. She was waking up late at night. She would think that she had left her oven on because she would smell food cooking coming from her kitchen. Well, there was part of the home's history was one of the previous owners loved to cook. She was the neighborhood cook. She would fix these huge meals, invite everyone over, and they would, just go on and on about how well, how delicious her cooking was. That was her pride and joy. Well, she would smell food cooking. Her oven wasn't on. She hadn't even cooked anything that night. But she would smell these phantom smells, food cooking.
So the spirit was continuing on with what she was best at.
Um, that she was seeing shadow figures. She was doing, objects were, she was having the Doppler effect, basically, or where the objects would be moving and they would disappear from one location, show up somewhere else in the house.
Did she actually see an object disappear?
She she wouldn't actually see it as it disappeared. She would set it down and know that it disappeared, or know exactly where she set it, because she would physically make note of it because she thought she was going crazy. So when she first contacted me, I had her to start. Of course, the first advice you give them is to start a journal, and I told her.
Absolutely.
And I told her to start notating that in her journal. If she has a particular object that's being moved, write down where she sets it, what time, and it, things that she was putting down in her living room were showing up in her kitchen or in her study, and it was crazy. When she would go in her basement, just an overwhelming feeling of dread down there. Electrical problems in the house that couldn't be diagnosed. She had had electrician after electrician come out. Well, when we went out there, we we got so many different voices coming through the Echo Vox. We've got two mediums on the team. They were just being overwhelmed. But instead of having to do a cleansing, we did no cleansing whatsoever there. All we did was, while we were there, we said, this is the deal. She's a nice lady. She doesn't mind you being here. She's willing to coexist with you, share the home with you. All she asks is that you don't frighten her, you don't move these objects or anything like that, that you essentially share the home. If you'll respect her space, she'll respect yours. It seemed like most of the activity was in the basement. So we even said she will stay out of the basement unless she just absolutely has to come down here for something. Because there was one particular spot in the basement near where the chains still were, where these people were chained up.
No way.
Yes, these chains were still there. And we had, through the Echo Vox, I was standing close to the end of that chain, and we had a male's voice that said, when I was standing there, said, please move back. So I said, are you talking to me? And it says clearly yes. So I did. I said, okay, I'll move back. I said, why do you not want me to stand there? And then we got that same voice comes through, and he says, that spot's bad.
Oh, well, there you go.
So, and we worked down there. We said this, we worked with them and talked. We spent maybe about 3 hours in the basement in this conversation in the pitch black with the K2 going off like crazy, the Echo Vox, the voice recorder, communicating. And we said, okay, she's, you respect her part upstairs. You have free reign of the basement. She's not going to come down here unless she just absolutely has to. And we went upstairs. We said, and before we left, we thanked them for communicating with them, or communicating with us. We went upstairs. We told the client about our experience down there, what we had learned. We, we shared that information with her. We did a small EchoVox session up there, and she agreed to what we had proposed. And we talked to her about 2 weeks later. We did a follow-up, and she said that for the first time since she had moved in that house, that after several years, she finally felt like she actually lived there alone.
There you go.
And that was all it took. Was basically they had their story acknowledged.
Yes.
They got that and they got that respect. They were happy with that.
Instead of people coming in and trying to drive them away and stuff. I wonder, prior to that owner, if someone had tried that. It makes you wonder, doesn't it?
It does. It does, because I've talked with her a couple times since then, and since we just simply did that, since we simply made that arrangement, she doesn't. Now she says the basement, she's had to go in there a couple of times since then. Now she says the basement does seem a lot more active, but she says that the upstairs is perfectly quiet. Her animals aren't reacting to nothing. They aren't freaking out anymore. It's peaceful like it's never been before. She actually feels alone, and she loves it. No cleansing required. No, she's at peace in her home, and the spirits that are there apparently are at peace enough because they've had their story told. They've been acknowledged, and they're coexisting well. And sometimes that's all it takes.
It is. Communication is all, I think. But, I think that's incredible that after experiencing all that she was willing and able to come to that agreement. You have to have clients that are open to that suggestion, because most people just completely want it gone. Just make it go away.
Well,
and that's hard sometimes.
She was extremely skeptical.
After living in that?
Well, she was extremely skeptical at first. After we left there, she became a believer.
I can see that. And I don't know if you've ever had a home that you had to do a follow-up on. We have, we had one that was over at a lake house, and we went in and we did an investigation. It was active. It wasn't when we left. And about 6 months later, we got a call to come back that there was different activity going on in the home. And it was a different thing. And I think that had something to do with being right on water. And spirits, use energy and activity, use energy for activity where they can draw it from.
Absolutely.
And it's just so amazing to me that so many places are conducive to that.
Absolutely. And yes, we we had a similar situation with one to add to that. After you do a cleansing, a lot of people don't realize that cleansing is not permanent. There's a certain amount of maintenance that you have to follow through with.
Yes.
And we've had a couple that we had to follow through. One in particular, they were just terrified of it. And even after we explained to them, this is the purpose of the cleansing, this is to get rid of it, this is to eliminate the activity, they were letting anyone and everyone also come in and do a cleansing, and it
Oh
was
my goodness.
counteracting everything that had been done. And by the time that we went back for a follow-up, the activity was far worse than when we went there the very first time for the preliminary investigation. So
What do you attribute that to?
I believe that certain people have attachments to them, or temporary attachments, and I believe that sometimes they bring those attachments with them to certain places, and if they sense a high level of fear, they might say, hey, there's a few easy targets here. Nothing
And
about
it's a
hang
lot
out.
of energy that goes with fear, and energy is a draw.
Absolutely.
And, I find that interesting. I have an acquaintance in Key West who was on one of the television shows that are investigate, where they investigate. And this particular show wanted to do a follow up. And my friend who owns the home adamantly refused because she said that the person involved had left more in her home than they had started with. And
Right.
she absolutely refused to have them come back because it was so much more active when they got done. And
Ab-
I found that interesting because I had not considered that in the past. And,
mhm.
if you don't, if you do what this individual does and you're not, cleansing or, Reiki or whatever, I like Reiki. I think it works.
Mhm.
Then, you can carry attachments with you. And sometimes when it's you, you're not aware of that. I noticed that someone had commented in the chat about, they had heard that you're not supposed to investigate your own home.
Mhm.
And I would agree because I think that that's supposed to be your refuge. Your home should always be your refuge. But like in my instance where I did bring something home with me, I'm sure you've done that also,
Mhm.
that sometimes you have to, like we said, take ownership of it and just say, who is this? If you're not sure, then you need to take steps to cleanse your own home. Maybe not investigate it, but cleanse it every
Right.
so often.
Right. Well, I have a few that linger around the property that I'm well aware of, but I had quite a phenomenal experience with one of them that tends to linger on the property, and this one in particular is more than welcome to stay as long as he would like to. But I'm not sure if I've ever shared this experience on the show or not. Where where I live it's in the country, and I've when you pull up when you pull up to my house, if the exterior lights aren't off, it's dark. I mean,
Right?
it's really dark. I live right on the edge of the woods. Well, one night and a little side history about the property I'm on is my driveway before it was the old county road was part of a railroad track. So there's you know how those tend to be carriers for a lot of activity in themselves.
Yeah.
and many people have reported seeing a man walking up and down my driveway. Well, that um, one night I pulled back. I pulled up at the house, and I was on the phone. For some reason, I didn't get off the phone, or I didn't get out of the car immediately. I stayed on the phone for about 5 minutes, 10 minutes after I got there. And I was still sitting out in the car. Lights were off. It's pitch black outside. Well, I hang up the phone, and I go to lean forward to reach for the door handle to get out. Now, I'm in the car by myself, and I feel a hand come from the back seat and pull me back and pin me to the seat. And I'm a big guy, and for somebody to pin me down, that's not an easy task to do. But it did. It literally forcibly pinned me back to the seat where I couldn't reach forward to grab the door handle. And I knew I was in the car by myself.
Wow.
And at first, I'm like, okay, where is this going?
Well, that would be my second thought.
Right. That's not a good feeling at first, but and I don't know why I had this strange compulsion to turn my headlights on. Well, and I was able to reach up. I couldn't reach my door handle, but I was able to reach up just far enough to turn my headlights on. And when I did, the first thing I seen was a set of green eyes glowing back at me. There was a coyote about 5 feet in front of my car.
Oh, so that was protection.
Yes, had I got out, I would have most likely been attacked by that coyote.
You would have been a snack.
Mm-hmm. So whatever was there pinned me back, so I couldn't get out and become, a coyote snack.
Well, that's people think that the paranormal is so scary. And, it can be if you're experiencing things that make you go, or hearing bumps in the night, or, your animal is reacting in a strange way, or your child. But a lot of times there are protective spirits around, and they don't get enough, I don't know, credit or publicity or whatever, but people just always assume the worst when it's not. And like you said, you were taken aback because well, this can't be good. Something's pinning me, and I'm military tough guy, and I am pinned. What in the world? And it was actually saving you. And I think people need to realize that happens, I think, a lot more than the negative side does. You have spirit guides, you have you have guardians, I think you have relatives who check in on you.
Absolutely.
I think that if a spirit is in a location, it has a reason for being there. That's why I think attachments don't happen nearly as much as people think they do. Because a spirit is in a location for that spirit's purpose. And but I do believe in spirit guides, and I do believe in, whether you want to call them guardian angels or your grandma who is keeping an eye on you. They're all good. Right.
And well, needless to say, after that experience, I was like, thank you, thank you.
You want to.
Right. You got free run of the place. Right. So, so the ones that I have around here, they're welcome to stay as long as they want to.
I've never personally come across a bad one that was around me, and I hope that continues. I'm not pushing my luck, but you just really have to know who you're dealing with too.
Right. Well, and something that I believe, and Yes, Ross, I know we're going a little over time here, so we'll wrap it up soon. But I don't care. I'm live and broadcasting, so.
I'm good. I got chemicals I gotta get.
I, but I, you were talking about attachments. A theory that, just a personal theory that I have regarding attachments is hitchhikers. I believe that people get those two mixed up. I believe that there are a lot of spirits that are curious, that they may temporarily attach just to check you out, to see what you're about. I believe when you go in and investigate some locations, I believe spirits that typically aren't there will come from, especially like if you're in maybe a tight knit neighborhood, and maybe there's spirits in this house. Well, maybe the house next door to it has a couple of spirits.
We had that happen at
Hmm.
an investigation I was with Blaine on.
Right. I believe they all come together. They're curious, just as humans are. When something happens outside, it human nature. We see a wreck. We see flashing lights going on. Whatever. People come out on the porch. People drive by slowly. They want to know what's going on. I think that spirits are no different.
Absolutely. I agree with that. In fact, I know they're inquisitive because if you have ever tried to use a flashlight, a flashlight for communication or a REM pod with the bright lights and that kind of thing, they come to check it out. They will actually, I've had tremendous results with
Hmm.
flashlights. And actually, Amy Rooney is who told me how to do that and explained, she and Adam Berry both were explaining how, why they do that so often.
Hmm.
And they are nosy. I mean, they're just like you said, they're people, they have people issues.
Absolutely. We've encountered that quite a few times. Well, like on the one investigation I was telling you about, where we were picking up a lady with a British accent that we couldn't explain. There was no history of anyone ever living in that home with a British accent. That was completely out of place for that location. So we talked to the homeowner, and then that's when the homeowner tells us, well, no one's ever lived here. Now, there was a lady that died several years ago from two houses down, and that confirms that.
Yes.
So I definitely believe that. And, I believe that spirits are attracted to people with like personalities. I think that if you are a positive person in life, that you keep that positive type mentality and as a spirit.
Oh, absolutely. And if you're
And
a jerk in life, you're a jerk as a spirit.
absolutely. And when a jerk comes along, well, hey, misery loves company. Why not,
Yes.
why not follow this guy for a little while, see what he's all about? And maybe this guy goes to someone's house, they're scared, they've got some issues going on. This guy says, well, hey, I can screw with these people pretty good. I think I'm going to stay here.
Yeah.
That's why I say that's where I come up with, my little personal theory about hitchhikers, where people report others will come to their house and the activity will be worse after they leave than it was when they came. I think that's why that happens.
Yes. I
This,
think so.
but the same
Well,
as you're a very positive person and you've never had any negative attachments. Why would a negative spirit or a negative entity want to attach to you?
a lot of time, I actually, that's not true. I have had one, but it was because of,
Hmm.
it was inadvertent. It wasn't because it chose to attach to me.
Right,
It got slung on me.
right.
But that was an exciting moment. But it was just one of those things that I was so blown away. because it was a complete shock. I was not expecting that at all.
Hmm.
And I had to have help with it because I couldn't get my energy between me and it.
Right.
And so I did have to have some help with that. But it wasn't damaging, it wasn't mean, it wasn't, I wasn't in danger. It was just the way that went. And that's one of the things that you do learn when you're investigating is that make sure the people you're with who are going to do what they want to do are experienced enough to do it safely. This was a
Absolutely.
this was a Reiki cleansing, and instead of throwing to the side, the person just slung their hands. And I am here to tell you that if I did not believe in Reiki before, I was an immediate believer in Reiki at that moment because it was just an immediate sensation.
Hmm.
And like I said, it wasn't anything I anticipated. There was no fear of it happening to me. It just occurred, and it was something that will open your eyes and make you go, "Wow, okay, I am attentive now." I have a question for you,
Sure.
and I have a client that we have worked with before that this was rather an issue. A lovely woman, physically sound in every way that you can know,
Hmm.
who has issues and is seeing physical manifestations that no one else sees them. There are DVRs set up around the outside perimeter of the home. There's some inside the home. When we did our investigation, there was some activity
Hmm.
that not everything that she had experienced, which of course there's not always going to be.
Right.
But when we left, I felt like like the client needed medical help
Hmm.
relevant to this, and um, the family was not at all open to doing that. Although they also felt that there was a need for it, they just weren't ready to do that yet. And when went back to do our reveal, the woman was very angry
Hmm.
because I said, you know, these are not real boys. They're not video. They're not,
Hmm.
there's cameras all around your house. There's no video footage of real people coming into your home. And because in conversation they were. And when you have you had a situation like that where you felt like there might be a physical reason for
So,
what the person was experiencing, but you were not able to help them?
so it seemed like the activity was. Do you think that it was truly paranormal activity, or do you think it was perhaps maybe more of a mental issue, like a hallucination?
I think that it was both, but that if they were manifesting only where she could see them and were not being picked up by video.
Hmm.
And I don't think that those two things go hand in hand.
Right.
So we did get enough evidence to make me think that there is something happening. But, you know, I was just at a loss on how to address that after the fact. And it is a concern because I greatly enjoyed the woman.
Now, something that I've ran into in the past is, and this is something that could be the situation. There always is the possibility of hallucination or something to that effect. Or another possibility is she could have some type of abilities. such as clairvoyance. How old is she, roughly?
Um, Old enough that there could be issues
Okay,
physically.
okay. Because a lot of times, would you say like past mid 30s?
I would say closer to 70s,
Okay, okay,
60s to 70s.
okay. Because something that I've found with different cases, a lot of times when there's a sudden onset of abilities where you take a person that doesn't recall having them all of their life, like such as being clairvoyant, clairaudio, things like that, where just out of the blue they come on. Typically, it 9 times out of 10 with the cases I've seen personally, it comes with some type of medical diagnosis, a physical ailment, not a mental ailment, but something such as fibromyalgia, lupus, some some of your blood disorders, anemia, leukemia, multiple sclerosis. So there, it would definitely be a good idea for her to have a good physical exam with some good blood work to see if there are any underlying issues. And then again, also at that age, it probably wouldn't hurt to check to see if there are any issues with Alzheimer's or dementia as well.
We tried going there,
Hmm.
and she adamantly refused anything.
Right,
We addressed it with family, and she adamantly refused.
right.
I believe the word duck fit would fit there. So,
Right,
and for those that are listening that are not from the South, it's almost as good as a hissing.
right. And that's one that you don't want to be around for. I will
Now,
say.
especially when it's a sweet little old person that gets their dander up. They're a little bit feisty. But yeah, I had just been curious if you had run into an investigation where the client could be impaired in some way.
Absolutely, and if they aren't willing to be open-minded to take your advice based on your experience, then there's really not much you can do for them.
Yeah, but I just, you just wonder sometimes because she could be seeing something manifest. It could only manifest to her.
Right, and
And
there's a very good chance that it could be targeting her for that specific reason.
yeah, and it was, well, I mean, it was just tormenting this poor woman to pieces. It was interesting.
Right, and like I was saying earlier, something that I've ran into quite a few times. I talked with a friend of mine just last week who has always had prophetic dreams, but has just recently started having clairvoyant experiences. And the first thing that I made this friend do was promise to go get a head to toe physical.
Yes, because
And
something changed.
right, because the the big thing about when there's a sudden onset, 99% of the time it doesn't just happen for no apparent reason. There is a change in the body's alignment that causes these abilities to manifest themselves. So, and I'm always willing to advise a client of that. Go get a physical. So, so definitely something to consider for anyone listening who, if you run into that, always be aware that if they have a sudden onset, there very well may be an underlying physical condition, and or a mental condition, or both. And people with physical conditions and mental conditions can be targets in haunting
They can be
cases.
targets. It's like adolescent females with the poltergeist activity. I
Yes.
think I think that can be adolescent male just as easily because you have the hormones raging, you have the emotional turmoil, you have everything changing physically, emotionally, and mentally at one time.
Hmm.
And I also think that for women, I'm not aware of it being an issue for men, but I do think that for women, as they hit menopause,
Yes.
that causes like a freeing, or again, because there is so much. You still have more control of yourself than you do in the adolescent scenario, and I think that's why skill sets pop up. Blaine calls it getting an upgrade. You
Absolutely.
know, and it's just so much more active and stronger as you have an emotional upheaval like that. And about the time that I had my experience that made me decide that I was going to go ahead and follow this back up, I I was hitting that point, and I think that had possibly something to do with that. That whatever was there that I had made be dormant just popped back out.
Right.
Oh,
Well, and relating to what you're saying about the hormones and adolescence versus menopause, if you consider as if adolescence or puberty isn't stressful enough, take the stress of everyday life. By the time a woman's old enough to go through menopause, typically she's got children that are, if not grown, near grown. Most of them are in a career situation, mortgage, that, typical everyday stresses that are just overwhelming in themselves. And then you throw the added stress, the hormone changes, and everything else from going through menopause into the mix. And that is just the perfect storm. So that is a very, very good point that you brought up.
well, thanks. I just think that I've been on an investigation in a home that did have a young female who was creating poltergeist activity, and she was older. She was actually older to be doing that. She was closer to 18, but she was in such emotional upheaval. She was cutting,
Hmm.
and she was doing other forms of self mutilation and such, and it was that everything at one time was just exploding around her, and then it was literally exploding as
Yes.
well. The house, the kitchen was just coming apart, doors everywhere.
Hmm.
And it's so that's the only case I've had that was that blatant.
Well, no,
That
in that one, was she being attacked herself?
she had been there was a possibility that there had been some physical abuse
Hmm.
and that she was repressing it. That was not directly from her, that was from a family member. And that she was in the process of losing a family member that she cared about a great deal. So, and she had just relocated, and the family had differing practices of faith.
Hmm.
And I think that she just felt like everything was spinning out of control, and this was how she could control was through the cutting. I found through some of my information, there's a really great organization called To Write Love on Her Arms that deals with that.
Hmm.
And I just found it just so tragic that she was coping with this stuff, but I was so glad that she manifested the poltergeist activity at least to get people's attention and to be able to vent some way other than harming herself. I know
Right.
that sounds crazy, but she was getting a vent.
Hmm. That
And
well, it's there's only so much that you know that the mind can hold before it, as a protective function. It has to release that energy somehow, and as the clinical studies show, when you look into parapsychology, it tells you that when the mind has two options, it's either shut down or release it subconsciously.
yes,
And when it releases it subconsciously, there's your formation of this poltergeist.
and and it just and it stays there.
Hmm.
I mean, people think that yeah, you can go in and cleanse a home and poltergeist activity stops.
No.
Poltergeist activity doesn't stop until the individual that it emanates from gets help,
Hmm.
finds a method of coping.
Right.
And most adolescents cannot do that by themselves.
Right. That poltergeist activity is one of the definitely one of the toughest haunting situations to deal with, by all means. And the reason I was asking if she had found herself to be a target of some of the a physical target of the poltergeist activity it
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I misunderstood
is
that.
is we I found from cases in the past that a lot of times not only are they angry at those around them that are in the home, like you referred to, typically it's teenager, they're mad at their parents, they're mad at their siblings, they're mad at everyone else, they've got that going. But in a situation like you had mentioned, a lot of times they're mad at themselves. They
Yes.
have that sense of self-harm, and subconsciously this energy physically attacks themselves. People a lot of times question that. Well, if this is projected from them, why are they being attacked?
Because it's a punishment. It's the same as the cutting.
Absolutely.
I mean,
Perfect
it is.
example.
It's, and she had the whole shebang, and it didn't help that there was still a lot of anger between her parents, and it just was the mother talking about the father to her. The father was estranged because of that relationship, and there just wasn't a good thing about it for her.
Right. It's just so many different stress factors that are all combining into one that it literally makes for an explosion. And so that's great information to put out there for anyone who ever comes into that. If you get a poltergeist situation, your most effective tool is counseling that individual. You've got to
Yes.
flood that environment with positive energy. You've got to make them, and not just that individual, everyone in that household, everyone in their environment has to be active. It has to be one of those situations where everyone is working together, or it it's a team effort between you, and it requires from the team a very stringent follow-up effort.
Yes. And that is something that the team I was involved with at the time didn't see. And that's one of the reasons that, not the only, but one of the reasons that I'm not on that team anymore. And that would be Kylie shaking. I apologize. But she wanted her 15 seconds, I guess. But it's just you have to put the good of the client above getting more evidence. You're not there for any reason, or you shouldn't, in my opinion, be there for any reason other than to help someone. If this is what you choose to do, and
Right.
this is how you're presenting, then that's what you've got to do. You've got to be there to give the best advice you can, to give them the best help you can.
Absolutely. And that's something that I'm big on is make sure your mind is in the right place. Be sure that you're there, number one, to help the client. And it's great if you're doing research, but remember the client comes ahead of the research. You
Yes,
can do your research from the data that you gather in the process of helping the client. And number two, you can't help a client effectively if you haven't educated yourself properly.
absolutely.
And educating yourself does not entail watching a few paranormal TV shows. That requires cracking those books open,
Yes.
studying, put your nose in the books, really do some research, really be prepared because you're going to encounter some situations that you can't explain and you need to be ready for them.
Well, and you need to, you know, there's so many different fields of study, but one thing that I have found absolute is that you have to be ready for whatever is going to come at you, and that includes your documentation.
Yes.
You have, like, I've created like a questionnaire, and Kim has one, and ours aren't the same, but between the two of us, they're good.
Hmm.
That you get information from. I was fortunate when I um, showed up at a investigation at Sloss one time to run across a woman named C.A.S.P.I.R, who is a ufologist and a cryptozoologist and has an interest in the paranormal as well. And she wrote a book with a friend of hers called Admissible. And it's a field manual for investigating UFOs, paranormal activity, and strange creatures. And she wrote it with her friend Richard Dolan. And she and I were talking at one point. She was doing a radio show that night, and we just hit it off, and we're talking about how people do different things and how there needs to be a continuity, like a chain of evidence. The reason her book's called Admissible is because, is it admissible or inadmissible?
Absolutely.
Admissible. Because you have to have a chain of evidence.
Hmm.
And, it doesn't matter if she is in Bolivia interviewing someone or, doing field research, or if she is at a convention lecturing or whatever. It is, you have to have your documentation. Because, every time you do something like this, if you're really going to be doing what you need to do, you should just consider that, when you go to do your reveal, you need to have all the information possible to give to your client, and that helps with that fear factor. And
Right.
if you're following procedures and documenting as you go, that helps with that too. And, I'm sure I try not to go anywhere that a home study hasn't happened. I don't know if y'all do that
Yes.
as well as the initial interview. Um, we don't always, because of some of my team members' schedules, we don't always have that luxury.
Hmm.
But it's so important because if you're just talking to someone on the phone, sometimes you don't get the full idea of what they're trying to describe, or their of what's happening to them. And it's a safety feature, it's a documentation feature, mainly it's a safety feature.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, because there are those clients that are seeking attention.
Hmm. Absolutely. And you will run into some who are truly mentally unstable. I hate to say it, but you will encounter those. You'll encounter some who are just seeking attention, just some who are looking for some Friday night entertainment. And
Yeah.
in some areas, there are clauses in mortgages and leases where they can get out of a lease or a mortgage if a house is haunted.
I know there's some places that actually now have to have it stated on their sign. And if you go through New Orleans,
Hmm.
haunted apartment, I mean, the signs are down on the street where they have, the for rent signs and stuff. They say they're haunted or not.
Hmm. So, so there, that's always something to consider. This person, you have to truly take a look at the person who is calling you out to come investigate their place. What is their motive? Are they truly seeking help? Is this person perhaps a little bit mentally off and needing some help that you can't give them? Or do they have an ulterior motive? Are they trying to get the place declared as haunted so they can get out of their lease early without
Right.
a termination? So, and and Ross has brought up a good point in chat that some people do black magic, things like that in homes, and maybe it maybe there wasn't any type activity at first, but perhaps they invite something in and don't know how to put it back out. So,
We have had those calls, and
yes.
that is probably my least favorite situation to walk in on
Hmm.
because they are never forthright
Right.
about that they've done something to bring it there. They are, they never have a clue what's happening. And sometimes well, always, if that's what it is, you have to know what you're coping with. Because if it's something that's been unleashed through those practices,
Hmm.
then that's a different color Kool-Aid than
Right.
a familial spirit that's there to protect you, or, if it's attached to the property, that's a different thing than something that's been invoked.
Absolutely.
And, if somebody is practicing black magic, voodoo, whatever name you want to give it, or whatever causational situation, you've got to be protected. And there are different ways to protect yourself in those environments.
Uh,
And I don't like being sandbagged.
right. And not only that, but another point to mention with that is in those situations, I'm not sure if you've ran into it or not, but sometimes if you're too quick, and I hate to say this, but sometimes if you're too quick to respond in those situations, they think, oh, well, it's easy to get rid of it. We can just call these guys if we bring something else in.
Yeah.
So they're quick to do it again.
Yes. And the more that they do that, in my opinion, this is not scientific, but the more that I've been aware of people doing that, the more
Hmm.
powerful what they are involved with can be.
Right.
And you get to a point, I'm not a demonologist. I
Right.
have no interest in being a demonologist. I
Absolutely.
have no interest in dealing with negative energy like that. And if I know that's what is there, I can get appropriate help.
Right.
I am not appropriate help in that situation. Neither is most of my team.
Right. You
And
sound exactly like me on that. I feel like my role is to investigate the activity and document if activity is occurring or not, and if it is, and if help is needed further, get it to someone who can offer help. But outside of that, there's not
yes,
there's not much I can do. I'm not clergy. I'm not a demonologist, and don't want to be neither of the two.
no, I mean, that's just, there are people who excel at that. And that, to me, that's a spiritual calling. and a spiritual gift, as well as an education. And you do have to be educated in that. You
Yes.
can't just walk in the door and do it, in my opinion.
Right. I would absolutely agree with you. I I believe that it is critical that as a paranormal investigator that you know what your role is as a paranormal investigator.
And your limitations.
Yes, yes. If this person needs help from clergy, then I don't feel like it's my role. I actually feel like it would be irresponsible and reckless of me to take on the
Yes.
role of clergy, and or if they were to need something like a demonologist or whatever the case might be, or a counselor or
Yes.
a physician. All I can give them the documentation that we gather from our investigation for them, and I can even go with them and present this with them.
Yes.
But it's irresponsible and reckless for me to be the one to offer advice from that standpoint when I'm not trained for it.
Exactly. I
So,
agree 110% with that. And I never use that phrase, but I just feel so strongly about it.
yes, so that is definitely advice that I would offer to anyone on a paranormal team. Know your roles, know your limitations, and know your liabilities.
Oh, yes. And that's something that most people don't even anticipate. That, you are liable if you cause harm.
Yes.
I don't know that anybody's ever been successfully penalized for that, but when you see the people that step outside the para-unity box and they're doing their own things, they're provocateurs, they're arrogant, they're not sure how to cleanse properly.
Hmm.
You know, there's so many things that you can do that cause more problems than you fix. And I see that every so often. It's just like, oh my goodness, you said what? You know,
Exactly.
what on earth were you thinking? And it's not ever one of my team members. I will give credit where it's due. We're very professional. Every person I work with is just right as rain, and they know how to do what they do, and they do it very well. But I have seen people that just make you go, "You're making them more afraid. Please stop making them more afraid.
Right.
That's not going to help anyone."
Right. That is definitely something you've got to do. Is you've got to try to eliminate that fear as much as you can, because fear is such a powerful emotion.
Yes.
So,
And it can affect every aspect of your life.
oh yes, absolutely, and not only from a mental aspect. Fear turns into anxiety, and anxiety can easily manifest itself with. We were talking about this just before the show, how anxiety has more physical symptoms than it does mental symptoms.
Yes.
I mean, there's a shortness of breath, the heart palpitations, your um, choking sensations, intestinal problems, and
All of which can get put down to to paranormal activity if the person so chooses.
yes, and
And
and I have seen that many times get mistaken for a paranormal attack. I help something sitting on my chest at night.
I'm being choked.
Yes, I'm being choked. Something is attacking me. Something's keeping me up at night. When what it is, it's that fear turning into anxiety and building it up. When you eliminate that fear, magically the paranormal activity stops.
Yes.
So
Isn't that fascinating?
it is.
In all fairness, I have a client who literally was being choked. I don't mean to make light of that in case he's listening, But he literally was choked in his own bed, and that was something that was terrifying for him. And I don't want him to think that I'm making light of that. I'm simply saying that that is a symptom of an anxiety attack also.
Right.
You can't breathe, you can't swallow, you're going to have a heart attack and die. You know, that's your mind going through all that stuff, and that's part of your fear factor.
Absolutely. But anyway, I guess since we're about 40 minutes over, we should work on winding down.
Yes, I'm really impressed that your network has let us go so long, but I've enjoyed every minute of it.
Oh, me too. I could honestly, you know, I could keep going. I always enjoy talking with you. It's so great. It's there's so many things that so much good advice that you have to give, and what I'm going to have to do is I'm just going to have to bring you on for another show.
Well, I tell you what, I am up for that anytime. I've enjoyed this very much.
Awesome.
And thank you for the nice words. You're pretty informative yourself. I enjoy talking with you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you being willing to come back. And while I've got you there, be sure to put out some information how everyone can look you guys up and get in touch with you if they need you. And
Okay. Well, I'm on Facebook as Katherine Hobson. I also am a member of C.A.R.E. of Alabama, as Frank said, and we have a Facebook page as well as a website. And you can reach us through our team founders, one of our team founders' webpage for the book that she's written, Haunted Shelby County. It's all about the different places in Shelby County, Alabama that have really terrific activity. And she does bus tours and book tours, and you can find out about places you may want to investigate when you come here if you read through that website or Facebook site and the book. But that's my team, and we love what we do, and we like helping people who need help.
yes, I can vouch for you guys. Friends with all of you, and excellent team. And I made the remark. You're the third guest off the same team that I've had on the show in just 2 months. So
Wow.
that's not a coincidence. That's because you guys are doing it right. So
Well, thank you. We do our best, every one of us, every time.
So and definitely check out their Facebook page. Check out Haunted Shelby County, Alabama. What's the website address?
It is. Ah!
I'm trying to think. Scare of Alabama.
Scare of AL, I think. Let me look. But I do know that if you go on Facebook to Scare of Alabama, you will find us there, and that will have a link to the webpage. But I am going to see if I can pull that up right quick. And I'm such a bad team member.
No, the only reason I can keep up with ours is because I just type them out so regularly. So don't feel bad.
Well, I never have to type it out because if I'm on the right device, it just whips right up there. But, something that you may want to look into, and people that are listening may want to do also, is get in touch with your local haunted houses. This time of year. There is all kinds of stuff. And we've done investigations in those. The first one being Warehouse 31 in Pelham, Alabama. And it's really amazing, the stuff that is there, that you wouldn't anticipate. Things that the venue may not be haunted itself, but the materials that they bring in, the autopsy tables, the drills, the bone saws, and all of that. You just never know.
Right.
It is scareofal.com.
Okay, definitely check out that website because their team always has different events going on. They do tours out at Sloss Furnace regularly, which are awesome. Of course, right now Sloss Furnace, they're not able to do the tours because they've got the Sloss Furnace and everything, but there are the bus tours. They're doing the storytellings at some of the local places and several other events. So lots of great things going on, especially if you're around the Birmingham area. That's great. And the point that you just made, yes, if you don't believe in haunted objects, we can both prove you
There's
wrong.
haunted objects. There's a guy close to you that has an astounding haunted doll collection.
Right. And those are one of those things, if you've never experienced a haunted doll on an investigation, just wait till you do. It will change the way you think.
It certainly will. My first experience was Robert the Doll in Key West.
Oh, wow.
That's a good way to start.
Definitely. That's what you call being broken in right.
Yeah.
Well, Kat, thanks so much for being on the show. It has been awesome. Can't wait to have you back.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it tremendously, and I'm looking forward to coming back.
So, and for everyone, thanks for listening, even in overtime, and we look forward to everyone tuning in again next week. So, happy hauntings and have a good night.
Thank you for listening to Paranormalities and Ponderings with the C.A.S.P.I.R Paranormal team. Brought to you by the Paranormal King Radio Network. We hope you enjoyed the show, and will tune in again next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. Please be safe as you're out there, especially if you're investigating the paranormal. Take care. Have a good night and happy hauntings. Thank you again from the C.A.S.P.I.R Paranormal team.